Welcome to a distant future full of possibilities, where the enigmatic Florvins are humanity's alien best friends, and their gift of the quantum space drive allows starships to slip through the veiled dimension they call the strange, as they visit distant planets and stars. Come along with the astral navigators and their Florvin counterparts as they explore the galaxy and build friendships that will change the course of history. The strange is calling you. Welcome, friend-shaped entities, to the first episode of the Strange Space Adventures podcast. I'm Katie Silverwings, author of the award-winning series of cozy, optimistic science fiction stories this podcast will be bringing to you each week. I'm thrilled to be here with you in audio form to share the tales of strange space. The first season of the Strange Space Adventures podcast will be covering my debut novella, Feathered Friendship. This tale of a small bird finding her place in the galaxy is still a personal favorite of mine, and I have had so much fun recording it for y'all. Each week, I'll be presenting a chapter or three from the book. If you'd like to read along, each episode's chapters will be posted on my website when the episode airs for members of the Strange Space fan club to enjoy. The book is also available in its entirety from wherever you prefer to acquire books, as both print and ebook if you'd like to read ahead. Links for all of that are in the show notes. And now, without further ado, here's the first installment of Feathered Friendship. Chapter 1. In a small private laboratory on the starship MSS Venture, a woman sits sorting through images and data on a set of holoscreens. She's dressed in the ship's standard yellow-accented gray sciences department uniform with the knee-length kilt-style skirt instead of trousers. A long white lab coat drapes over the top of her uniform, the ship's insignia and her name neatly embroidered over the breast pocket. An especially bright yellow and green bird is perched on top of the woman's head, sleeping with its feet securely gripping the elastic band holding her wild reddish-brown curls up in a looped ponytail. This is Dr. Ariadne Salazar-Newman, one of the most brilliant xenobiologists to have ever graduated from the Central Academy of Sciences at Teagardens Star. She's the head of Venture's bioscience team, and in her spare time is something of an enthusiast for the Earth species Melopsitacus undulatus, more commonly known as the budgerigger, a member of the parakeet family. One whole wall of the space behind her is arranged with open cages and a wide variety of perches, ropes, and hanging toys. A dozen more budgeriggers of various colors are sleeping on and around those perches. The birds have free reign of Dr. Salazar-Newman's personal workroom, and although they're technically supposed to stay there, the one currently sleeping on her head often accompanies her wherever she goes. A long, weighted bead curtain hangs over the door of the workroom to discourage the rest of the birds from escaping into Venture's main biosciences laboratory. The running joke among the other members of her team is that one day she's liable to grow feathers herself for all the affection she has for her birds. They respect her despite this bit of eccentricity, or perhaps in part because they find it endearing. A wind chime-toned voice from the other side of the bead curtain draws Dr. Salazar-Newman's attention away from her work. "Dr. S., are you home?" "I'm in here, Kobe. Come on ahead." She spins around in her chair to face the door, disturbing the slumber of the budgerigger perching on her head. It fluffs its feathers out and chirps at her in annoyance before settling back into a comfortable position. A small adolescent Florvin steps through the bead-covered doorway and into the workroom. This is Cobalt Meriday, Dr. Salazar-Newman's favorite part-time assistant and protege. They're a provisional apprentice to Venture's senior quantum space drive engineer, one of the two adult Florvins responsible for moving the ship through the veiled dimension their species calls strange space, with the assistance of their human astral navigator counterparts, a form of transit which allows humanity's starships to travel over greater distances than the laws of physics would allow in a reasonable amount of time, but is not without its dangers. As their public name suggests, under their pattern of tiger-like silver stripes, Cobalt is a brighter blue example of their genderless, asexual, mostly humanoid species. The hair around their cat-like ears and the rest of their head is a mess of silver cowlicks, having once been cut much shorter and now being in the process of growing out. The locks that would otherwise fall into their 3 golden eyes are secured back with a set of crossed bobby pins that each have a small yellow star on one end. They're dressed in the Navquan department's charcoal gray version of the trouser-cut uniform, tailored to allow all 4 of their arms and their long, silver-tufted prehensile tail to move comfortably. Additionally, they're wearing a small cloth and mesh pouch secured on a sash beneath their lower set of arms. I didn't expect to see you so soon, dear. Is it morning already? Yes, technically, Cobalt replies, coming over to her. You did say to come back once I was done helping with the jump shift, and Elder Navy let me out of the second cycle tonight. Have you been in here with the birdies all night again? I suppose I have, Dr. Salzar Newman says with a bright laugh. Must have lost track of time going through those reports Diego gave me earlier. Don't worry, I'll catch some sleep once we're done here. How did your jumps go? It went okay for once, mostly. All 3 of Cobalt's eyes shift to one side as they remove the sash and bag and pointedly change the subject. Elder Navy asked about your bag, by the way, but I didn't know what to tell them except that it was for your research and you said it shouldn't be opened. Really? I know I spoke to them about this project. Perhaps we'll have to discuss it again. They said they'd ask you when they see you at breakfast. Cobalt offers the bag to her, holding it carefully, but that it didn't seem to cause any interference with the jumps, so they'd probably be okay with approving it once they know what you're up to. Well, now that's good news. Dr. Salzar Newman takes the bag and rolls her chair over to one of the other work tables where she has her incubators and analysis equipment set up. Now, let's see what you've brought through quantum space for me. What is in there anyway, Dr. S? Didn't I tell you earlier? You didn't. I was running late for the jump shift, remember? Cobalt rolls their third eye dramatically while leaving the lower pair still and then smiles. You just handed it off and said to keep it with me tonight. Now what is it? Small treasures, dear. I chose 2 of Judith's clutch for this experiment. Eggs? All 3 of the young Florvin's golden eyes widen as they look between Dr. Salzar Newman's excited face and the collection of small birds perched around the room. You really had me carrying eggs through the strange? I was sure I told you. Dr. Salzar Newman clucks her tongue thoughtfully, then brightens again. But yes, dear, of course. How else could I test for the effects? I love Navy to bits, but you know as well as I do that they were hardly going to let me send a whole bird in with you. Of course they wouldn't. It's too dangerous. But an egg is a bird too, Dr. S. Not yet, Kobe. Just the possibility of a bird. If there's one thing I've learned hanging around Navy all these years, it's that quantum space likes possibilities. Now let's see what we have here. Dr. Salzar Newman carefully opens the layers of mesh padding and removes a small white egg, setting it into a testing apparatus. Cobalt watches over her shoulder with interest as the equipment scans the egg and shines a light behind it, illuminating the fine red tracings of veins over the yellow mass within and projecting an enhanced image of all of this on the display screen in front of them. Dr. Salzar Newman looks back to them with a broad, excited grin. There we are, Kobe, see? One healthy and viable embryo. Although we'll have to wait a few more weeks to see how it hatches and if exposure to quantum space has affected it at all. I had a feeling the shell would be enough to protect it. I'm glad the embryo wasn't harmed, says Cobalt, a concerned tone still coloring their voice. The tuft at the end of their tail twitches softly. That bag of yours would hardly keep the miasmas from getting in. That was the idea behind the mesh design, Kobe, and that it had let them all out again when you and Navy brought us back into normal space. Zoe would never forgive me if I went and exposed myself by accident again, you know. Elder Navy wouldn't have been happy either, Dr. S. They wouldn't have let me bring this to you if they thought that it could have hurt you. Both of them worry too much about me, I'd say. Dr. Salzar Newman chuckles. Now, Kobe, don't you start worrying too. I can hear that tone of Navy's in your voice already. Yes, ma'am. I'll try not to. Cobalt, though, has ample reason to be concerned. Direct contact with quantum space is incredibly harmful to humans. Exposure is known to cause blindness, insanity, and even death in a matter of minutes, depending on the circumstances. This is why a Florivan has to be in the sealed quantum space drive bay to run the nightly transit cycles while the rest of the ship serves as a safe bubble of normal space. Their species is halfway native to the veiled dimension and immune to its effects. In the course of her career thus far, Dr. Salzar Newman has been briefly exposed to various amounts of quantum space miasmas no fewer than 8 times. Her team often attributes her more pronounced eccentricities to this, but as Venture's primary Nav1 team can attest, she was mostly the same even before her first significant near-death experience. What is this experiment anyway? Cobalt asks, tilting their heads slightly to one side. I thought you said you wanted me to help you with research on training birds to serve on starships. I am researching that, dear, and what better way for a bird to help than to detect miasma leaks in the case of an emergency? From the look on their face, Cobalt is utterly flabbergasted by this thought. Now, says Dr. Salzar Newman, setting the egg into a waiting incubator, we'll see how one egg does with just the initial half-jump cycle's worth of exposure. She takes a second egg out of the pouch to examine it in the same way she had the first. The other one will keep riding with you every time you go jumping until it's ready to hatch. You really might want to make sure Elder Navy's okay with that. Oh, naturally. But they did agree to let you assist me and carry the bag, and this experiment is paramount to my research, you see? These two are my proof of concept eggs. I need to know whether exposure can affect the embryos at all to start, and what happens with a prolonged series of regular exposures. You're looking for a specific effect, then? Ideally. It is documented that humans who survive longer exposures retain a minor sense of which side of the veil their ship is on, after all, and in rare cases are even able to identify the presence of miasmas almost as well as a Florivan can. Like you do sometimes, then. Precisely. My theory is that a bird could acquire the same ability and be able to patrol a ship with a handler and point out potential miasma leaks and prevent accidents. Cobalt hesitates for a long moment before nodding slowly. If you say so, Dr. S., but it might not be good for the birdies. That's why we're starting just with these 2 eggs. If it doesn't work out with them, I'll probably scratch the whole idea and sort out another way to do this. She looks over to Cobalt from the readouts on the egg. Now, which one do you want for your jumping buddy? You want me to pick? You might as well, Kobe. You're the one who's going to carry the egg for me. Dr. Salzar Newman puts the second egg into its incubator and then reaches out a hand and briefly ruffles the young Florivan's mess of silver hair. Cobalt allows the contact, although their ears twitch with a momentary irritation. Florivans in general are known to be a semi-eusocial and quite tactile affectionate species. For a number of reasons that they would never openly discuss, Dr. Salzar Newman is currently the only person in the galaxy whom Cobalt ever allows to touch them, even casually. She's also the only person thus far whom they've come to trust with the full truth of those reasons. Cobalt becomes very quiet, staring intently at each egg with all three of their golden eyes for some time before gesturing at the second one that was taken out of the bag. This one, maybe? It doesn't make much difference, but I like this one. Any particular reason? Cobalt shrugs. Not really. Fair enough. Dr. Salzar Newman laughs and stands up from her chair. Come on then, help me close this place down for the night so we can both get a bit of rest. The bird sitting on her head is bothered enough by the abrupt movement now to make a few unhappy chirps and then fly over to the collection of colorful branches where the rest of the flock is sleeping to find a less active place to perch for the night. It might often accompany her around the ship, but it always sleeps in the bird room. Elder Navy said to make sure you'd not forgotten to eat dinner if I found you here instead of in your quarters, says Cobalt, busying themselves with tidying one of the cluttered workbenches. You know, Kobe, I can't remember if I did. Dr. Salzar Newman shuts down the holoscreen she'd been staring at before they came in and rests a hand behind her ear in a brief, thoughtful gesture. We'll just have to drop by the mess to sort out snacks or something on our way. That sounds good to me. As the two of them leave and Dr. Salzar Newman taps the keypad beside the door to turn off the lights, the two eggs sit silently in their incubators, warm and unaware that they've been chosen for a different destiny altogether from the rest of the clutch they started in. Chapter 2. Her first awareness is that she exists in a very small space that no longer fits. She's cramped up inside the world, barely able to move at all. Her first thought is that it would be nice to have more room. She strains against the edges of the world. She discovers both that she has a beak and that this includes a sharp tool right at the end that is perfect for trying to break through the hard walls holding her in. She makes an excited sound at this realization, then sets to work trying to break through the wall of the world. She doesn't know what to expect on the other side, or even if there is an other side to seek out. She tries anyway. The unknown is far better than being cramped up in a world that's too small. With great effort and exertion, she taps her way into making a small crack. For the first time, she can feel a bit of warm, moist air that's fresh and moving, coming into her tiny world through the crack. I want out, she chirps, now knowing that there is freedom to be had from her confinement. Let me out. Eventually, although she doesn't know how long it takes, she makes the crack big enough that the whole world breaks apart and the walls fall down around her. She's free now, and in a much bigger place than she's ever known could exist. She's blind still and knows nothing of this bigger world around her. Even so, it's warm, and she has a sensation of softness underneath her. Hello, she chirps out, shakily stretching and resting from her efforts. Is anyone there? I've escaped from the small world. At first she thinks she's still alone, but then she realizes the strange sounds she hears above her are voices coming from somewhere nearby, although she doesn't yet understand what they're saying. Hello, she chirps again. Hello, I'm free. Hello, I'm hungry. Feed me. Hello. That's where we'll leave our story for this week. I hope you've enjoyed these first 2 chapters of Feathered Friendship. Next week, we'll see more of the early life of our darling bird and meet a few more members of the cast. I can't wait to share it with you. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave a comment or review on your podcast source of choice. Reviews and recommendations are the best way to help grow the show so I can continue bringing you more and better stories each week. Be sure to subscribe too so you don't miss the next episode. If you'd like to support this podcast and all of my other ongoing projects in the Strange Space universe, you can join the Strange Space Fan Club. It's free to join and gets you access to perks like the Strange Space Encyclopedia, chapter transcripts, and the official fan club newsletter. At higher tiers, you can also access the full archive of Strange Space stories on my website, receive exclusive fan club merch, and more. You'll find the link to join in the show notes. Thank you so much to all of my existing fan club members, especially Astral Navigator tier member Sharon T. Hinton and long-running space adventurer Tabitha. I am deeply grateful to all of my fan club members for making this podcast possible. Thanks again for joining me today on the Strange Space Adventures podcast. I hope your new year is filled with opportunities and joy. This is Katie Silverwings wishing you the best the galaxy has to offer. Stay shiny! The Strange Space Adventures podcast is brought to you by Pep Talk Productions, LLC. Strange Space is a trademark of Katie Silverwings, LLC, and all content of this podcast is copyright 2025 to Katie Silverwings. For more information on Katie Silverwings, Strange Space Adventures, and this season's story, visit www.katiesilverwings.com.